Forget everything Hollywood ever showed you about stagecoaches. Those adventure scenes with beautiful landscapes and brave heroes? Pure fantasy. Reality was different. Unbearable heat, choking dust, frequent robberies, and passengers who barely survived the trip. Diaries from that time reveal stories the movies will never tell. These are 20 real facts that will change how you see the Old West. Number 1. 9 people where 6 should fit. Wells Fargo stagecoaches promised adventure, but delivered suffering. The line owners wanted maximum profit, so they crammed 9 passengers into a space designed for 6. Knees bumped knees, elbows dug into ribs. Trips lasted days, sometimes weeks, crossing territories like Arizona and Nevada. And here's the detail nobody shows in the movies. There were no bathroom stops. In the 1870s, the solution was a bucket passed hand to hand while the stagecoach bounced along. Men, women, kids, all packed in together. The smell after 2 days under the desert sun? Unbearable. The windows stayed open, but then dust blew in and coated everything. Closed, the air became impossible to breathe. Passengers paid good money for this privilege and still had to defend themselves from bandits along the way. And stagecoaches were just the beginning. One of the most famous gunmen of the era literally worked as a stagecoach driver. I pinned the full Old West dossiers in the first pinned comment if you want the names, dates, and sources. Number 2. Have you ever stopped to think about what it meant to travel for hours swallowing dust? It wasn't just uncomfortable. It was a real threat to your health. Old West stagecoaches didn't have glass in the windows, just leather curtains passengers could pull down. The problem was, with them closed, the heat got unbearable. With them open, dust from the dry roads rolled in waves. Travelers described not being able to see the person sitting next to them. The fine dirt stuck to your eyes, got up your nose, and coated your throat. Doctors at the time recorded cases of miners and frequent passengers developing what they called dust lung. In California in the 1850s, with thousands crossing the state chasing gold, many reached their destination coughing up blood. Some never recovered. The road took its toll before you even stepped off the stagecoach. Number 3. The guy's name was Charles Bowles, but he became known as Black Bart. Between 1875 and 1883, he managed to rob 28 Wells Fargo stagecoaches in California. And check this out. The guy never fired a single shot. He'd show up in the middle of the road wearing a hood made from a flour sack, point an unloaded shotgun, and order everyone to get out. He only took the company's safe, never took anything from the passengers. After a few robberies, he started leaving poems inside the empty boxes, signing them as Black Bart the Poet. Wells Fargo offered a reward, hired detectives, and nothing. You know how they caught him? Because of a handkerchief he dropped at a crime scene. It had a laundry mark that led straight to him in San Francisco. The man lived like a respectable gentleman in the city. Number 4. Old West stagecoaches were basically death traps on wheels. The roads weren't paved at all, just hard-packed dirt with hidden holes. When a wheel hit a deep hole at speed, the impact was brutal. Passengers got thrown out of the coach without warning. In Wyoming during the 1860s, small-town doctors already knew what to expect when they heard a stagecoach had overturned. Broken bones were the best-case scenario. A lot of people died on the spot with their necks snapped or crushed under their own wagon. Drivers called certain stretches rib breakers because everyone knew the danger, there was a sure thing. Even so, the routes didn't change. The mail had to go through, passengers had to get there, and the companies didn't spend a penny fixing any roads. It was take the risk or stay home. Number 5. The horses were the fuel for stagecoaches, and the system worked like a brutal relay race. Every 10 miles or so, the whole team was swapped out at stations along the route. An experienced driver had just 2 minutes to change the animals and get moving again. The problem was, it didn't always work out. Horses would simply collapse in the middle of the road, dead from exhaustion. Others broke their legs in holes or loose rocks. When that happened far from a station, Passengers were stuck out in the desert, sometimes for days. Stagecoach companies lost hundreds of animals a year. It was a high price, but nobody stopped. The mail had to get through, passengers had to keep going, and the West didn't wait for anyone. Number 6. Stagecoaches carried more than passengers. Cholera and smallpox rode along for free. In the 1850s, it only took one sick person to infect everyone inside. The space was so tight that when someone threw up, it hit the person in front of them. There was no way to get away. The leather window covers stayed closed because of the dust, so the air didn't circulate. People who were healthy in the morning showed up sick by night. A lot of them didn't even finish the trip. They died at stops and were buried in a hurry in shallow graves on the side of the road. The survivors kept going on the same bench where the dead person had been sitting just hours earlier. Nobody disinfected anything. The next group of passengers sat in the same spot, touched the same surfaces, and the cycle kept going. Riding a stagecoach was gambling with your own life in a way we can't even imagine today. Number 7. Wells Fargo and other companies never told passengers what was coming. The stagecoaches didn't have real suspension, just leather straps that barely cushioned anything. Every hole in the road launched your body up and slammed you back down onto the wooden bench. Dentists in frontier towns reported cases of people showing up with broken teeth just from the trip, and it didn't stop there. Doctors documented passengers with back problems that lasted for months after a single crossing. The rocky stretches between Missouri and California were the worst. Some travelers would rather ride horseback for hours than put up with 5 more minutes inside that shaking wooden box. Number 8. The stop stations were basically Russian roulette for your stomach. Passengers had no choice. Either you ate what they served or you went hungry for days. The typical menu included salted meat that had already gone bad, hard bread with green mold, and coffee that looked more like puddle water. The owners of these stops knew nobody would complain because the next meal was hundreds of miles away. Travelers wrote in diaries that diarrhea was so common it became an expected part of the journey. Some chewed tobacco to cover up the bad taste of the food. Doctors at the time recorded dysentery outbreaks directly linked to these stations. The business was simple: maximum profit at zero cost. Fresh ingredients were way too expensive in the desert, and nobody inspected anything. You paid, you ate, and you just hoped you'd make it to your destination. Number 9. The brutal math of the stagecoach. Let's do the math together. From Missouri to California was about 2,000 miles. The companies promised to make that trip in 25 days. Sounds reasonable, right? But here's the detail nobody mentioned in the brochure. It was 25 days without stopping. Day and night, sun and rain, the stagecoach kept moving. Passengers slept sitting up on hard wooden benches, getting jolted at every hole in the road. There were no hotels along the way, just horse change stations where you maybe had 15 minutes to stretch your legs. A lot of people reached their destination with their backs locked up and their nerves shot. One traveler from the time wrote that he would have rather walked. When someone complains about a 5-hour flight today, it's worth remembering what traveling really meant back then. Number 10. Stagecoaches had rules nobody likes to remember. Native Americans and Chinese people simply weren't allowed to ride inside the cabin with the other passengers. When they did get a ticket, they rode on the roof, exposed to sun, rain, and road dust. Some were forced to walk alongside the vehicle for whole stretches of the trip. Their money was accepted, but their presence wasn't. The companies didn't hide it. It was official policy. The drivers had clear orders, and anyone who complained got left on the road. While businessmen slept on cushioned seats, others paid the same price to swallow dust for miles. America was expanding westward, but it carried divisions that would mark the country for generations. The wheels kept turning, progress pushed forward, and segregation rode along every mile. Quick note: if you like the real diaries versus Hollywood side of the Old West, I pinned the exact research dossiers I used. Billy the Kid, Jesse James, Wild Bill, Buffalo Bill, and more in the first pinned comment. Number 11. Traveling by stagecoach was risky for anyone, but for women, it was a whole different story. Alone in those cramped cabins, squeezed between strangers for days, they dealt with stares, comments, and unwanted hands. Drivers rarely stepped in. They had other things to worry about. The law? It stayed in the towns, far from those dusty roads. Without a husband or brother nearby, a woman was on her own. That's why a lot of them started carrying small revolvers hidden in their purses or strapped to their thigh. Derringers became travel companions. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival. Newspapers at the time ran stories about women pulling their guns on abusive passengers. Some companies even recommended that female travelers be armed. In the Old West, protection didn't come from a badge. It came from your own hand. Number 12. Stagecoaches crossed Comanche and Apache territory without any military escort. Attacks happened in canyons where there was nowhere to run. Passengers would find arrows piercing the wood before they even heard any yelling. The drivers were the first targets because without them, the coach stopped. Some routes lost so many men that companies offered triple pay to anyone willing to drive. Survivors said the silence right before the attack was the worst part. You'd look at the rocks and see nothing. Seconds later, hell broke loose. Plenty of armed passengers managed to hold out for hours until they ran out of ammo. The ones who lived carried scars and stories they'd rather not tell. Scalping wasn't some movie legend. Documents from the time record real cases on the plains during the 1860s. Crossing that territory took a kind of courage few people had. Number 13. The Rocky Mountains hid a secret the stagecoach owners preferred not to talk about. When winter hit, temperatures dropped to 30 below zero. Passengers were given only thin blankets and a bottle of whiskey to make it through. A lot of drivers said they arrived and found people frozen on the benches, still sitting there like they were asleep. It happened so often that some stations kept extra coffins during the snowy months. Survivors often lost fingers and toes. A seasoned Wells Fargo driver once said the mountain cold killed more people than all the bandits put together. And worst of all, the companies kept running because the mail couldn't stop. Number 14. The Mojave Desert didn't forgive anyone. When the stagecoach crossed that hell, the thermometer inside the cabin went over 50 degrees. Passengers were crammed into a space with no ventilation, breathing dust and other people's sweat for hours. The water ran out way too fast. Experienced drivers knew that stopping in the wrong place meant certain death. A lot of people would just pass out and never wake up. Bodies dried out so fast that sometimes they reached their destination already mummified. Stagecoach companies tried traveling at night in the summer, but bandits preferred the dark. It was a choice between killer heat or an ambush. Passengers carried lemons to suck on during the trip, trying to trick their thirst. Some survivors said their tongues swelled so much they could barely talk. Number 15. You know that awful feeling when your suitcase gets lost at the airport. Now imagine that in 1870, when there was no insurance and no lost and found. Old West stagecoaches were famous for losing all kinds of luggage. The problem started on the roof, where trunks and bags were tied down with ropes that gave out on those rutted roads. One harder jolt, and there it all went rolling down a hill. Getting it back was impossible because the driver wouldn't stop for anything in this world. Bandits could be nearby. There were also thieves who slipped into the stop stations and just disappeared with whatever they found. Important documents, clothes, money, work tools, everything turned to dust. A lot of settlers reached their destination with literally just the clothes on their back and had to start over from scratch. That was the price of traveling back then. Number 16. Did you know stagecoach companies gave whiskey to the drivers as part of their pay? It wasn't a party, it was survival. Driving a stagecoach through hostile territory with bandits, wrecked roads, and extreme temperatures took nerves of steel. The alcohol helped them handle it. But it came at a steep cost. Accidents were common when a driver went too far. Stagecoaches flipped on turns, horses bolted out of control, passengers got thrown. Some companies even tried to ban drinking, but the drivers themselves refused to work without it. It was the only perk they had in a job where life expectancy was short. Whiskey became part of the routine at stop stations, as essential as changing the horses. Number 17. Traveling by stagecoach in the Old West was for people with a lot of money in their pockets. In the 1850s, a coast-to-coast ticket could cost what an average worker earned in a whole year of hard labor. A lot of people didn't have that kind of cash, but gold fever and the promise of cheap land were louder. So what did they do? Simple. They went into debt up to their necks. Whole families bet everything they had, sold property, took out loans with brutal interest, all just to buy a ticket on those uncomfortable wagons. If the trip went wrong or California didn't deliver the dream it promised, you showed up broke and owing money. It was a life-or-death gamble. Some made a fortune. Others never made it back home. Number 18. Stagecoaches that crossed forested areas faced a danger that didn't come from bandits. Bears and wolves learned that those night stops meant easy food. The horses, tied up and exhausted, became targets. Imagine trying to sleep knowing predators were circling the camp. Companies hired armed guards, but there were never enough to watch every side at the same time. A bear attack could kill horses in minutes, leaving passengers stranded in the middle of nowhere. Wolves were more patient. They waited for the campfire to die down. A lot of travelers spent whole nights awake, rifle in their lap, hearing branches snap in the dark. The Old West tested your courage in ways you'd never imagine. If you've made it this far, you can tell the Old West was way stranger than the movies. I pinned the full case file dossiers, outlaws, lawmen, timelines, sources, in the first pinned comment if you want to keep going after this list. Number 19. What you might not know is that Wells Fargo didn't always play fair with its customers. In the 1870s, the company dominated stagecoach routes in the West and, according to records from the time, used tricks to boost profits. One of the most common was simple: deliberately delaying deliveries. The longer your package sat in a warehouse, the more storage fees you paid. In a lot of regions, there wasn't any real competition, so customers had no choice. Documents show that some routes were rerouted for no reason, increasing the distance and, of course, the ticket price. Farmers who relied on these lines to ship goods complained, but there wasn't much they could do. It was take it or leave it. The company you know today as a bank started out like this, squeezing every possible cent out of people who had no other option. Number 20. Anyone who survived the crossing was never the same again. Doctors' records from the time describe symptoms we'd call PTSD today: constant nightmares, shaking, not being able to talk about what they saw. A lot of pioneers who made it to Oregon or California spent decades waking up screaming in the middle of the night. They saw kids die of cholera, wives buried in a hurry on the trail, companions attacked. One 1852 diary says a certain farmer could never eat meat again after watching a group resort to cannibalism during a brutal winter in the mountains. Medicine back then didn't understand it. They called it weak nerves or melancholy. These men and women built the West, but they carried invisible scars to the grave. Hollywood shows the triumphant arrival. It never shows the price paid on the inside.